July 29, 2023. Leongatha, Australia. A cozy family lunch was about to become one of the most shocking murder cases in Australian history. Erin Patterson had invited her estranged husband's family over for what seemed like a peace offering: homemade beef Wellington, served with love and garnished with death. Within hours, 4 people would be fighting for their lives in hospital emergency rooms, victims of the most toxic mushrooms on Earth. 3 would die in agony. 1 would survive to tell a story that would expose Erin Patterson as a calculating killer who had turned her own kitchen into a murder weapon. This is the story of the mushroom murderer, a 50-year-old mother who poisoned her in-laws with death cap mushrooms hidden in a gourmet meal. It's a case that revealed how domestic disputes can escalate to unimaginable violence, how investigators unraveled a web of lies spanning years, and how one woman's quest for revenge cost 3 innocent lives. Leongatha is the kind of small Australian town where everyone knows everyone else's business. When Erin Patterson's marriage to Simon fell apart, the whole community watched the drama unfold with the fascination that small towns reserve for their most spectacular failures. Erin Patterson hosted 4 of her estranged husband's relatives for lunch in July 2023, but this wasn't just any social gathering. The 50-year-old mother of 2 was fighting a bitter custody battle with Simon, and his family had become obstacles to everything she wanted. Don and Gail Patterson, Simon's parents, were respected members of the community. Gail's sister Heather Wilkinson and her husband Ian were equally beloved. These weren't random victims. They were carefully selected targets who had committed the unforgivable sin of supporting Simon in the divorce proceedings. But on that Saturday afternoon in July, Erin played the perfect hostess. She welcomed her guests with warm smiles, offered drinks, and proudly presented the centerpiece of her meal, homemade beef Wellington, a dish so complex and time-consuming that it seemed to represent genuine effort to reconcile with the family she was losing. What her guests didn't know was that Erin had spent weeks planning this meal with the precision of a military operation. She had researched, prepared, and positioned herself to commit the perfect murders using ingredients that could be found in any forest. Patterson fed her former in-laws beef Wellingtons laced with poisonous death cap mushrooms, transforming a symbol of culinary sophistication into a delivery system for one of nature's most potent toxins. As the family sat around Erin's dining table, sharing stories and attempting to bridge the gaps created by the divorce, they were unknowingly consuming their own deaths. The woman serving them seconds and encouraging them to enjoy every bite was watching them eat poison with the patience of a predator who knew her prey was already doomed. Death cap mushrooms don't kill quickly. They torture their victims with a prolonged agony that begins with hope and ends with organ failure. Within hours of the lunch, all 4 guests began experiencing what seemed like ordinary food poisoning. Nausea, vomiting, stomach cramps, symptoms that millions of people experience after a bad meal. There was no reason to suspect anything sinister, no immediate cause for alarm. But death cap mushroom poisoning follows a predictable and terrifying pattern that Erin Patterson understood perfectly. The initial symptoms would subside, creating a false sense of recovery that medical professionals call the honeymoon period. Victims feel better, believe they're recovering, and dismiss their earlier illness as a minor inconvenience. During this deceptive calm, the mushroom toxins are systematically destroying their victims' liver and kidney functions. By the time symptoms return, more severe and ultimately fatal, the damage is irreversible. Don Patterson, 70, was the first to deteriorate beyond hope. The retired airline pilot who had spent decades flying passengers safely to their destinations would never make another journey. His organs began shutting down as his family watched helplessly, not yet understanding that he had been murdered. Gail Patterson, 69, followed her husband into organ failure. The grandmother who had welcomed Erin into the family, who had tried to maintain relationships despite the bitter divorce, was dying because she had shown kindness to a killer. Heather Wilkinson, 66, fought the longest battle against the poison coursing through her system. But death cap toxins are relentless, and even the strongest constitution cannot survive the systematic destruction they inflict on vital organs. Ian Wilkinson, 68, was the only one who would survive, not through any special resistance to the poison, but through a combination of medical intervention and sheer luck that would make him the crucial witness in bringing Erin Patterson to justice. As the family members collapsed one by one, emergency rooms across the region were dealing with a medical mystery that would soon become a criminal investigation. The pattern of symptoms, the timing of onset, and the connection between all 4 victims pointed to a single, terrifying conclusion: deliberate poisoning. When Detective Senior Constable Brett Noonan began investigating what appeared to be a case of accidental mushroom poisoning, he quickly realized he was dealing with something far more sinister. The first red flag was Erin Patterson herself. While her in-laws were dying in hospitals across Victoria, she remained remarkably calm, offering detailed explanations for everything and presenting herself as another victim of the tragic accident. But investigators noticed inconsistencies in her story that suggested careful planning rather than culinary mishap. Erin claimed she had purchased the mushrooms from an Asian grocery store, but she couldn't remember which one. She insisted she had eaten the same meal as her guests, but she showed no symptoms of poisoning. Most suspiciously, Erin had a ready explanation for every question investigators asked, as if she had rehearsed her responses in advance. Her behavior wasn't consistent with someone experiencing genuine shock and grief. It was consistent with someone executing a carefully prepared cover story. The breakthrough came when investigators began examining Erin's internet search history. In the weeks leading up to the fatal lunch, her computer revealed a disturbing pattern of research into death cap mushrooms, their toxicity, and their effects on human physiology. She had researched where death cap mushrooms could be found, how to identify them, and most damning of all, how to incorporate them into food without detection. The search history read like a murder manual written by someone who was methodically planning multiple homicides. But the investigation revealed something even more chilling. This wasn't Erin's first attempt at mushroom murder. It emerged after the trial that Patterson believed his wife had attempted to poison him multiple times in the 2 years before the lunch and had been wary of her intentions. Simon Patterson had been experiencing mysterious illnesses for years, symptoms that he now recognized as consistent with low-level poisoning attempts. The pattern of behavior painted a picture of a woman who had been systematically attempting to murder her husband, and when that failed, had escalated to murdering his family members in a twisted act of revenge. As the investigation intensified, Erin Patterson's carefully constructed facade began to crumble under the weight of forensic evidence and witness testimony. Her claim about purchasing mushrooms from an Asian grocery store fell apart when investigators checked surveillance footage from every possible location. No evidence existed of her purchasing any mushrooms on the days she claimed to have shopped. More damaging was the discovery that Erin had been foraging for mushrooms in local forests for months before the fatal lunch. Witnesses reported seeing her in areas known for death cap mushroom growth, often carrying baskets and wearing gloves, the behavior of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for and understood the dangers of handling toxic fungi. The forensic analysis of the beef Wellington remnants was devastating to Erin's defense. Laboratory testing confirmed the presence of death cap mushroom toxins in concentrations that could only have resulted from deliberate addition to the recipe. But perhaps most damning was the testimony of Ian Wilkinson, the sole survivor of Erin's murderous lunch. His detailed account of the meal, the symptoms, and Erin's behavior throughout the ordeal provided investigators with eyewitness perspective on calculated murder disguised as hospitality. Patterson, a 50-year-old mother of 2, was found guilty last month of 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder in connection to a home-cooked meal she served her husband's parents, aunt, and uncle in July 2023. The evidence against Erin was overwhelming: premeditation proven by internet searches, opportunity established by her role as cook and hostess, and motive demonstrated by her bitter divorce proceedings and custody disputes. She had turned her kitchen into a murder weapon, her dining room into a death chamber, and her hospitality into a mask for homicidal rage. The trial of Erin Patterson became one of the most closely watched criminal proceedings in Australian history. The combination of family drama, sophisticated murder method, and small-town setting captured public imagination in ways that few cases achieve. The jury has delivered its unanimous verdict in one of the most watched court cases ever, reflecting the national fascination with a case that seemed to combine elements of domestic thriller and forensic procedural. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented evidence of Erin's research into death cap mushrooms, her pattern of foraging behavior, and her previous attempts to poison her husband. They showed how she had planned the lunch as an opportunity to eliminate 4 people who stood between her and what she perceived as justice in her divorce proceedings. Most powerfully, they demonstrated how Erin had weaponized something as fundamental as family dinner, turning the most basic act of hospitality into an instrument of murder. The defense attempted to portray the deaths as a tragic accident, suggesting that Erin had inadvertently mixed death cap mushrooms with edible varieties while foraging. They argued that her internet searches reflected genuine concern about mushroom safety rather than murderous intent. But the evidence of premeditation was too overwhelming to dismiss. The timing of her research, the precision of her mushroom selection, and her complete lack of symptoms despite claiming to eat the same meal all pointed to calculated murder rather than accidental poisoning. The jury deliberated for 6 days before reaching their verdict, a unanimous finding of guilt on all charges. On July 7, 2025, the jury convicted Patterson of 3 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder, bringing legal justice to a case that had shocked the nation with its cold-blooded calculation. On September 8, 2025, Justice Christopher Beale sentenced her to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 33 years. It was the first sentence hearing in Victoria to be broadcast live, reflecting the unprecedented public interest in a case that had captivated the nation. The sentencing hearing provided a forum for victim impact statements that revealed the full scope of Erin's crimes. Family members described not just the deaths of their loved ones, but the destruction of trust, the shattering of family bonds, and the trauma of realizing they had been targeted for murder by someone they had welcomed into their homes. Justice Beale's sentencing remarks emphasized the calculated nature of Erin's crimes and their devastating impact on multiple families. He noted that she had exploited the most basic human trust, the assumption that shared meals represent safety and hospitality rather than danger and death. The 33-year non-parole period meant that Erin Patterson, now 50, would be 83 years old before she could even apply for release. For a woman who had destroyed 3 lives and attempted to destroy a 4th, it was a sentence that reflected both the severity of her crimes and society's determination to ensure she could never kill again. But the sentence also represented something more profound: validation for the victims' families, confirmation that their loved ones' lives had value, and assurance that justice could prevail even in cases where murder had been disguised as accident.